There, the brother-in-law met the casket there. They repacked it, they took it up to Cincinnati, put it in a vault like the receiving vault for the summer, and that winter when it was cold weather again, went down, got the casket, put it on a train in Cincinnati, brought it up to Monroeville, brought him to Norwalk, buried him in the Episcopal Cemetery. In later years his family decided they wanted a lot out here, so his remains were removed here. So we got around, considering we didn't have much transportation in those days. But I marvel that in his estate record, all of this is told, how the expenses of going there, of buying this zinc-lined casket and of whatever they put in there, I can't remember, for a preservative, because then they did not have embalming. The embalming had not been perfected. Actually, the Civil War, in which his son there was killed at Corinth, Mississippi, William, was not until the Civil War that they perfected embalming and were able to ship remains home of many of the soldiers. But this was a special case, and they spent a lot of money, but they managed to have his remains returned to Norwalk. But by very primitive methods, steamboat and train and what have you, to get him back here. So we'll move on over. Family believed that person had gone to heaven. That's where they were. You see the fingers pointing upward. Settlers here in Norwalk, Flat Benedict and his wife Sally DeForest. I do not know what happened to hers, other than I think it's someone's feeble attempt to clean it. I don't think it's vandalized or Halloween. I think it's simply someone started to clean it because the Gallup stones back there, which are their daughter family, some of them were cleaned and some of them looked like they'd sprayed graffiti on them. But Flat Benedict here and his wife Sally brought their 5 children, came to Norwalk in September of 1817, and they were the very first settlers within what is now the city of Norwalk, or what then was the village of Norwalk. Their house was on East Main Street, behind the what's now the county office building, east of the courthouse there, where it used to be the Citizens National Bank and the Home Savings and Loans. And that's where they lived. She died in 1852 and he died in 1866. He was a very hardy man. He's 91 years old when he died. He was elected the first president of the Historical Society in 1857, and he still was president when he died. And he was just sick a very short time. But he was a very active Mason, and you'll notice the Masonic emblems on the monument there. He had just been to the state convention or gathering in Toledo and caught a cold and came back and died about a week later in October of 1866. Mrs. Benedict was the daughter of a Revolutionary soldier, Daniel DeForest, from Connecticut, and the DAR chapter in Norwalk is named for her, the Sally DeForest chapter of the Daughters of the American Revolution. When she left Connecticut, when they left, she brought with her some slips of ivy from around her father's house, and there's none of them growing here. I guess we better not start it. It'll probably be all over everything. But around the Episcopal Church, around the Fireman's Museum, and several other places, you can see Sally Benedict's ivy growing. There's several places in town where it grows, the descendants of that same ivy that she brought with her. And again, many members of their family buried here, not as many as the Coles, although I've never counted. We could be close to it, but there's quite a lot of this clear back this around here are members of their family. Many of them, such as even Platt and Sally, were originally buried in the Episcopal Cemetery, but were moved out here in 1876. Their family bought this lot and decided to create a large family lot here. Ford, those are 3 streets in Norwalk, and those are the people they were named after. The gentleman who laid them out. Owned by the woodmen of the world, and it was for where members could be buried. And this man, William Parker, died in 1845 before the cemetery was established, but when they bought this lot, they had his remains moved here, and you see the symbol is here of the woodmen of the world.
Oddfellows.
Huh?
Oddfellows.
Is it Oddfellows?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Oddfellows. It had me woodman. I knew Oddfellows. Yeah. Anyway, you're right. Also, Flagstaff is here, but this lot was owned. Now, Erastus Gray, I think, was also a member of that. He has the Masonic emblem, but he's buried on this lot, and I presume there are other burials. I've never checked to see. And I'm going to talk about this mausoleum back here, which you can see took a direct hit from a tree last summer. That is the Harley Mausoleum, and the man who built it was named Orlando Harley. He built it in the style, it's called Egyptian architecture, really well done, except he did not leave that $1 million endowment to take care of it. His parents and several members of his family are entombed in it. He was a world-famous grand opera singer. He's from Norwalk, and he sang all around the world different times in various operas, and was considered to be an exceptionally well-known singer and a good singer. He gave command performances for the Japanese royal family, for Queen Victoria and her family at different times, and he died in England in 1901. A man from Norwalk went over there, took care of his property, had his remains shipped back, and he was entombed here with his parents because he wanted to be buried back in Norwalk. We're hoping to be able to do some restoration on this, but as you can see, if you were to do a perfect job, you would need probably $200,000 or $300,000, but we hope we can at least salvage it. This is one mausoleum that we had to finally weld the door shut because we could not keep vandals out of it. It was, for one thing, a retail store for hallucinogenic items for a long time, and was some sort of initiation place that you had to come back here, and they had somehow they could reach into one of the crypts, and that was some sort of test of bravery and so forth. But we hope to be able to preserve it. The monument right in front of it here, just a point of interest, is that of A.B. Chase. And Captain Alvin B. Chase was in the Civil War. He also is the man who started the Chase organ and piano factory here in Norwalk, but he died just a couple of years after he started it. Just this past Friday I wrote about it, how when he was in the Army as a young boy, someone gave him a book of the essays of John Milton, and he began reading them, and he realized there was a whole large world and a whole large thing you could do outside of his father's farm out in Fitchville. So he went into business, became a very successful businessman, but he ruined his health and he died when he was only about 37 years old. This is the burial place of some people that some of us knew, many of us knew, Reverend P.J. Garsha and Mrs. Esther Garsha. Reverend Garsha taught for 39 years at Norwalk High School and was a coach in his younger days. He also served for a long time as pastor of the Church of the Master at Steuben, which was a Baptist church, he being of the Baptist persuasion. And he also performed literally hundreds of weddings and funerals. There are probably, I would imagine, probably 1,000 people buried in this cemetery that he performed their funeral service. He was always one of those who the unchurched would turn to, or somebody who had no one else to turn to when they needed a clergyman to officiate. And at one point, Reverend Garsha had a stroke, and he made a deal with God that if he could recover, he would go to the hospital every day and visit everyone there. And he did. Every evening, usually in the evening, he made the rounds. He went in every room and spoke to every person. Even after he couldn't drive anymore, he'd have somebody take him out there. And he would go from room to room and visit every person there. But if he had a record of all of his marriages and funerals, it didn't remain in Norwalk, so I have no idea exactly how many there were. And I'm sure he had a record of it, but they're pretty nice people.
He was in Cuba originally, wasn't he?
Yes, he was born in Cuba. Mrs. Garsha was not, but she was a Native American, but he was born in Cuba, went to college here in the United States. I'm sure most of you folks, some of you remember it, and there was a lot of publicity on it last fall because it was 40 years ago. The evening of the day and the night after the day John F. Kennedy was assassinated, there was a nursing home near Fitchville which caught fire, and there were 84 persons who lost their lives in it, the patients, and 21 of those remains were never claimed by anyone. No family members, no one showed up to claim. Some of them, they had no idea who to contact, and these 21 persons whose remains were unclaimed were buried here at Woodlawn Cemetery about a week later, and they are between these two urns. There are 21 burials here. And the cemetery donated the grave space. The funeral directors in the county donated their hearses and caskets. And I don't know who paid for having this monument put up, but everything was donated because there was no money to pay for anything for these people. Many of them were wards of the state of Ohio who had been in state institutions, and when they became elderly and mentally incapacitated, they were placed in nursing homes, and in some cases the families didn't even know where the people were. They didn't even know if some of these were relatives. One lady called me a few years ago, and I believe it's her grandmother is one of these, and she said they had heard about this but they didn't know. And I presume she's come down here, maybe someone who puts flowers here, I'm not sure. But this was, at the time, of course, President Kennedy was assassinated, and everything that weekend was the assassination, and Jack Ruby shooting Lee Harvey Oswald and so forth, and then the funeral on Monday. The only other item in world news that was reported besides the assassination was this fire in Fitchville. This was the other major story of that weekend. But it brought about a great many reforms in nursing home laws. There was much more inspection. Governor Rhodes was here 2 or 3 times. He was here at the burial of these people on that about a week later. And there was a great deal of change in Ohio laws and in national laws concerning the construction of nursing homes, the maintenance of them, and the safety of them. So I guess, like many things, out of some terrible tragedy comes some good changes.
People might only in fact hold 16. So it puts the cemeterian in a lot of grief, and there's not any room, but there's not anything we can do about it. And then it got to the point where they started finally putting markers in the ground, which is what I want to show you here. You can see there's a marker here, one there, one over there, and there's one over here. We don't just find Joe Dokes and bury next to that